Good afternoon and welcome to InfoComm 2017. The latest in our well-established panel interviews or panel discussions we've got with a variety of people, integrators, end users. But today we have a couple of our colleagues who are integrators and an end user who can talk about managing AV globally, which is a highfalutin, very lofty phrase. But today we're going to try and find out what it takes to do this practically, what challenges people face, and what are some of the solutions they've found, and which ones work, which don't, and so on. But it's going to be a combination of theory and practice. So we'll see how far we go. We've got 20 minutes or so. So it's nice to see everybody. And perhaps the best way of starting is by introducing my colleagues. On my right, starting at the far right, is Julian Phillips, who is Executive Vice President of Whitlock, and there's something called storytelling in your title. So what's that about, Julian?
I got tempted to add something to my LinkedIn profile that said Chief Storytelling Officer.
Did you?
Yeah.
There's a whole tale in that, isn't there?
Well, there is.
Do you want us to go into that now, or shall we save for afterwards?
Let's see if I can tell a story today.
Sounds like a classic for an outtake, that one, I must admit. Byron Tarry, to his left, to Julian's left, who is President of the Global Presence Alliance. What's your day job again?
I'm also Director of Enterprise Solutions for Sharps Audiovisual in Canada as an integrator, but I like to call that my day job, and the Global Presence Alliance my night job.
Oh dear, that's yeah. Okay, for tax purposes, no doubt. And to my right and to Byron's left is Matt Stanford, who is the lovely title he's got here, Collaboration Technology Specialist at Teck Resources. Matt, what do you do exactly? What does collaboration tech specialist involved? Sounds like a great title to me.
Oh yeah, as you can imagine, I fix things when it breaks, and and I try and sell things to the business. So try and really centralize our AV, and I've spent a few years now trying to get everybody on the same page at our different business units, and negotiate service contracts and that sort of thing. So we work very closely with Sharps AV. They take great care of us in Vancouver and elsewhere. So yeah, it's a lot of things.
It's far too many, probably, and you're tasked with all of them, blamed for every single one of them when they go wrong, no doubt.
You're right.
Yeah, but you're smiling and look fairly healthy. You've obviously come out of it pretty winning here. And you've got a good support resource backup as well, by the looks of it.
That's right.
Byron's very good in that department, isn't he? So, Global Standard for AV can provide end users with a simple and familiar setup. Is that pie in the sky, do you think? Julian, you want to kick us off? What's all this global AV and standards about? Is it something attainable? Is it something really theoretical that's not really working in practice? It's more about linking up a few rooms globally, isn't it?
Yeah, it's very, very simple. Simple is the important word, actually. And we held a customer roundtable just before this session, actually, but we held one last year at InfoComm in Las Vegas. And one of the things that customers told us right now is that they're trying to achieve three things. They had to be pushed to prioritize what the three most important things were. But what they came out and said was, we need simplicity, we need standards, and we need scale. We need the ability to be able to not only take the complexity out of doing this, but we need to be able to standardize that and do it everywhere around the world. And so we've spent the last year trying to figure out doing that, and had some great examples with customers who now have realized that this isn't just pie in the sky. It's not something that is an aspiration that can't be achieved. It's actually a business necessity now, because AV is an essential part of every experience, meeting experience, and every collaborative experience that businesses have now. And it's no longer optional to dodge the bullet of how to do this. You have to actually get on and do it. And so the one thing that I think pretty much every organization that operates around the world has a goal to do is to create that user experience around the world that is the same, that does actually make it easy for people to actually just get on and work and actually be productive. But the challenge is how to do that. This is a very, very complex thing to do, and there's a whole range of different issues that come to bear. But I think the pie in the sky thing is that's no longer an issue. Everyone knows they have to do it. The key issue is how to do it, and where to go for the answers for that.
Byron, are they forced into doing it? Is there some business imperative that happens when suddenly they have a Damascene moment and they think, oh dear, we need to have some common thought on all these complex issues, and someone somewhere has suddenly to take the charge of all that? How does it actually happen?
Well, I think it varies by organization, as is usually the case. Any good consultant's answer is it depends. But Actually, at this roundtable we were just running, we had a few perspectives on that. In some organisations, it's a major business failure that occurs. An executive has a meeting that goes down and finally says enough is enough. Someone go fix it, and suddenly they get that imperative from on high to now move the mountains that in some instances need to be moved to be able to actually create a detailed enterprise delivery strategy for this. And in other instances, it's more progressive organisations that are typically, again, coming from on high, whether that's an imperative around their workforce strategy, particularly dealing with new millennial workforce and retention and attraction and so on. It may be a speed to market business innovation strategy or something. So it'll vary as to why it gets driven, but more and more, as Julian says, it's becoming an imperative for many. Not all are figuring it out yet, and not all are managing to move those mountains yet, but those that do, the results are tending to be fairly significant in the impact it's having on their businesses.
So if it can come from anywhere, who tends to drive these initiatives? Are they a C-suite level initiative, or are they coming from other elements, other areas of the business that then gets pushed up because the scale of it demands executive attention and financing?
I guess in the most successful instances, we're seeing it coming from the C-level. Now, that's not to say that the C-level's doing all of the detail effort to figure it out, but it has to come from the C-level. In part because it's complex. Although we see AV largely driven by IT, the reality is it touches, even from an implementation, a support model. It touches so many portions of the business. So you can't do it alone. If it's just left in that siloed instance of IT, then generally it's very difficult to succeed. Real estate has to be on board, procurement has to be on board, human resources have to be on board, as well as the business units who ultimately, and we often forget this, are the end user, the one demanding that improved experience, the one demanding those tools that will actually allow them and their teams to move faster. All of those have to be aligned if you're going to achieve a successful strategy.
So do users have power then, and is that power related or worked alongside AV?
Well, I think they have power in voting with their feet and voting with their voices, and at the end of the day, voting with whether they'll use the technologies or not. And we've seen many an example over the years of big expenditures on these technologies, and then they don't get used because the user wasn't engaged in a part of it. So while they may not have the power as an individual to solve these things, they certainly do start to have the power in terms of how they behave and react, and en masse start to be able to drive some of these strategies. That said, the organisation has to be willing to listen, and I think as an industry for many years we've had a poor user experience for those users. They've been dissatisfied, they voted with their feet by perhaps not even using the technologies, but it's taken a while in many instances for some organisations to recognise the potential impact that's having on their organisation, or at least the lost opportunity that it's having, and now starting to recognise it is that business imperative that Julian talked about.
Matt, if I can come to you next, if I may, what started collaboration thinking in the company? Where did it come from? When was that moment they thought, well, hey, we'll call it collaboration, or was it called something else and it developed into what we now call collaboration and therefore a structure? Could you just give us a little insight into what you call collaboration within tech?
It's a great question, and like we said earlier, many definitions to that term, but I think for us, we have quite a traditional workforce, I would say, coming from the mining exploration industry. It's a lot of I don't want to say older folks, but higher aged.
Don't look down the table when you say that.
It's experience, Matt. It's experience.
Yeah, exactly. So they have a lot of experience with technology, but maybe not as much in modern audiovisual and that sort of thing. So for us, like, our investment in video began a while ago, but it was very much about that face-to-face experience. So just not a lot of content or collaboration, but about the executive in their nicest room wanting to be able to talk to executives at other sites in the business unit. So what we've seen over the last few years since I joined is way more of a reliance on content. But still, for us, it's pretty basic content sharing. Can you see my screen? Not a lot of interactivity or annotation happening yet, except little pockets here and there in engineering departments and that kind of thing that actually want more of that depth. But for us, when we got into, we're now based on Skype for Business, so, and have been using it since the OCS days and Link. So we've always been a Microsoft shop and have kind of emerged through that pathway, and so that's kind of helped us now deliver a common user experience, at least at all sites. So that's good. But we're keeping a keen eye on the sort of new, the collaboration boards that are happening. We're trialing the Surface Hub and the new Skype for Business integrated systems as opposed to traditional VTC for video and voice and content. So we're just trying to really get that core user experience the same.
What came before that, though? What was the thinking behind how you came to the product? I mean, was there a strategic decision made that every element of the company had to get closer and talk more closely together? Was it done between divisions? Was it done between areas of responsibility? How did it come about that stage of thinking before you got to the product?
Right, that's a good question. That was a little bit before my time, but
that's okay.
I imagine that
I know you're young.
I believe we certainly weighed our options, but because we were so embedded in Microsoft at the time, I think Skype made the most sense, or it would have been Link at that time. So
it was what I suppose keeping in touch with operational requirements. Was it there was a need? Sometimes it can start through something quite basic like travel content, and suddenly the company rethinks how it channels communication with its own boundaries, and then realise it's a global application, and realise it's a sense of scale that has to cope with that. And then thinking then develops into how the company itself manages things globally, and then everything falls in. I said, well, if we can do this with this, can we do AV globally? And then suddenly you enter a different element of decision making, and you then, one thing starts to lead to another, and structures get put in place. What sort of infrastructure have you got there to support the tech and the business decision making going on?
In terms of infrastructure, in terms of like a program around it, or
anything really. It's from the management program. Is there a general thought about how the business develops globally and what technology is needed to support that? And clearly there'll be an infrastructure plan that supports Skype and whatever other technology you choose to roll out globally to whatever office you've got.
Mm-hmm. Well, I would say in AV and collaboration and UC, for us, that's still in its infancy.
Okay.
So we're trying to model more off of our programs that my colleagues in the rest of the IT department are using, where they've had the chance to do voice and network and storage and connectivity for years, and it's a lot more of a refresh plan. You can almost describe it as a service, but because our individual sites and business units, they don't see AV and UC the same way that they see network or their storage or even real-time systems. For us, real-time is an entire division of IT where that's running trucks and shovels and actually getting ore out of the ground. So we try and look to them for that guidance where we can, but the sites still see meeting rooms as commoditized. They just need a TV on the wall, they need a projector. They're often going around us to procure. So we're still in the stage where we're trying to really corral everyone and at least centralize that sort of thing.
So they commoditize you. You need to change that way of thinking. You're very important.
I'd like
you
to
need
think
to tell
so,
them that.
Sure.
They're IT people. You need to tell them that you're very important and need to be not commoditized, but actually treated very differently. And you have a huge empire you need to develop and expand. You know that, don't you? And there will lie the power and your success. It has to come, really. And you've got fantastic integration expertise behind you, so your world's your oyster, really.
I think Teck did have that.
I know I'm being flippant here, but you know what I mean. I think AV gets marginalised too much as being too much of a commodity, and not enough thought goes beyond. Actually, this is a really valuable infrastructure technology that needs to be used, and it's an essential conduit to the major running of a global enterprise. And I think it's that sort of hurdle of thinking that we need to get round and actually get up to that level and talk about, so that we do get not just basic applications running globally, but everything else as well.
And in fairness, and with some credit to Matt in perhaps underselling himself and the organisation, certainly 3 or so years ago when we first engaged was when Teck first, I think, came to the recognition of a need to invest as a specific business unit as opposed to just what used to be the case of just lumped into IT because it's techie stuff, so we'll just throw it over there. That they invested both in bringing dedicated resources on around AV like Matt, and then also invested in sustained service level agreements and infrastructure to support that, so that they could start to at least put the foundations behind improved user experience, improved collaborative capabilities, and so on. Now, certainly in a mining company, it's still all about the bricks and mortar of trucks and shovels and so on, as Matt said. But that said, they are also leveraging these technologies more than ever, and whether it's from simple business cases like travel costs to the changes that naturally occur as you put this infrastructure in place and you regain the confidence of users. I think Matt, you can probably comment, but that it has, in that last 3 years, and certainly I've seen from outside, changed some of the culture within your organization.
Yeah, and bad meetings is what really helps drive that. So, and make that value realized, because that's the kind of conversations I'm having with our general managers at the sites these days. Is it's not an add-on anymore. It's not an extra. It's not a nice to have. It's an essential part of doing business and meeting remotely, certainly. Because we still have a fair bit of on-site, in-person meetings, and certain management is going to be that way for a while. But yeah, when it comes to having a failed meeting or a bad technology experience, then it's like, well, that has to change. So, but we're trying not to let that be the only driver, obviously. But yeah, it's an absolutely essential part of doing business today.
How well do you get on with IT?
Well, I'm embedded fully in IT, so I'm still kind of getting an AV department, if you will, off the ground. My team is called Collaboration Services, so I'm the AV specialist inside of that team, but we look after voice, email, UC, everything that helps us collaborate, SharePoint. So it's a lot of relationship management for sure. The network guys are stingy, and we try and blame everything on them, of course, when the bandwidth is running low and stuff like that. So yeah, it's really all about relationships, I think.
How do you monitor how things are going? Do you do any sort of usability research, or is it just a higher priority, just getting things working and getting it out and open, and that in itself is an achievement, really?
It is. There's a lot of focus on that. We're getting a lot better at that these days. We're using Crestron Fusion that we put in about a year ago, so that's kind of getting off the ground, and trying just to bring more visibility into our rooms. We've got just such a huge amount of legacy equipment out there that's not on the network, so even just keeping an inventory of what we have and what's working and what's not is a challenge. But we're putting a lot more focus on that, for sure.
So how many sites are you monitoring at the moment? How many sites are you including in all this?
Well, we've got, with AV that we actively look at, it's probably about 20 sites, so in the order of 300 to 400 rooms, but many of those just have phones, so there's a great big swath of what's out there. But actively monitoring, we've got we're still kind of in the few dozen sort of range that's actually on Fusion, but grand plans to expand that this year.
What sort of things do you look at when you're looking at technology? You look at scalability, reliability, and all those sort of things. And how do you actually come to the decision? You said you more or less going with the Microsoft shop and standards that are already in place that IT has developed. How much freedom is there for you to move outside that and perhaps take a different decision if you think that product set or environment is more suitable to what you need it for?
Mm-hmm. Well, it's challenging. The two main areas I'm focusing on right now regionally are Canada and Chile, and a few other sites in South America. But a lot of product lines are differentiated between those two areas, and support and procurement and everything varies a lot. So we can't necessarily have one global standard for every kind of platform that we need. So we're being flexible on that. But reliability is top of mind. That's really when I turn it on, is it going to turn on? Things like projectors, we have to be very choosy about that. We have a lot of sites that produce steelmaking coal in Canada, and dust is a huge issue. So we really try and put our new products through the paces to make sure that it can actually handle these really harsh environments.
Julian, when it comes to supplying technology worldwide, you've got local supply issues and various other things, perhaps cultural conflicts. How do you get around all that? Do you have to do sort of a specification approach that includes, you decide on what overall effect you need and what fits into your reliable setup and so on, but how do you cope with local supply and availability of technology and so on that actually has a great deal more local impact or impact locally? How do you get around that?
I'm going to answer that question, but I'm going to deal with the concern that you raised earlier, Clive, when you asked Matt about the commoditization of value. I actually don't think the value of what we deliver and what we can enable for our customers is being commoditized. I think the value of what we provide to our customers as a provider internally, as a provider to our customers, is growing massively. I think the recognition is that although we might end up commoditizing some of the components, and that's inevitable when you go through that process of standardization, there is no commoditization of the value. I actually see that the value increases significantly. So I'm very optimistic and positive about the role that AV plays in the enterprise, and we're seeing a disproportionate amount of budget coming from IT to actually do collaboration globally. It used to be 3 or 4 years ago we were struggling to get proper budgets to do this kind of stuff. That's not a problem anymore. So what has happened, and I will now answer your question, is it's raised the game for us to figure out those answers of how we actually do procurement globally and how do we actually create those standards that we can deliver on that basis. And so one of the things in the Global Presence Alliance we've done is not only do we have 28 members around the world in over 180 cities around the world that can deliver and support, we've also engaged over 15 manufacturers who are supposedly global in their own admission. They might represent themselves around the world, but they're not necessarily organized globally. So it's entirely possible, for example, that you can have a display manufacturer that has fundamentally the same product, which is actually different in a fundamental different way in different regions around the world. And so therefore you can't create a standard that says we are going to supply this display in every single location around the world, and we know it will actually behave in exactly the same way with the same firmware release and the same sort of SKU for support. So one of the things we've been engaging manufacturers in is trying to educate them with our customers about the need to be able to start building global SKUs to actually reduce the complexity of the different products around the world, improve the supply chain and the delivery and support, and also deal with anomalies in pricing as well. One of the problems in the AV industry historically is we've been a very channel distribution controlled orientated business, and therefore you've seen dramatic shifts in what I can only term as sometimes natural pricing variance, but sometimes some unnatural pricing variance. And so I think those are the kind of issues that we actually face in trying to design standards and deploy them and support globally. But I think the great news is that manufacturers are now learning from that, they're changing the model, they're seeing that opportunity, because they're only going to act if they see the volume and the growth opportunity ahead of them, and it's worth their while to do it. But because, what I said earlier, the desire to want to do this globally is huge. The amount of budget that's available is getting bigger and bigger. Most manufacturers are actually responding now in a very, very positive way. So have we solved all of those problems? No, we haven't. Are we making progress and being able to actually work with customers to design and deploy the closest thing to global standards? We are getting there.
If you're supporting a company globally, what's the biggest challenge you face, both of you?
Oh, many, I guess, but I think it's less about a technology issue now. It's really more around an organizational structure that can actually facilitate that with those varying silos and so on, that they can align effectively. The procurement's not getting in the way and trying to take things out to bid when there's a global standard, that the local real estate and facilities group isn't trying to push contracts through a different mechanism and so on. It's not about a technical decision that the technology is good now. It may be about the process in which that technology is assembled and deployed and supported and so on, which really actually starts within the organization of setting up a structure that works. And that's where so many organizations have struggled, and we had 30 or 40 organizations sitting around talking about all those struggles, yet also talking about many ways that they're starting to solve them, but they're coming from internally and addressing those organizational culture, structure, and process and procedure elements that will allow you to facilitate that. At that point, they can then move through the process, and GSK, as a prime example, it took them 18 months to get through that process of realigning and issuing an RFP ultimately for a single global provider that could support them. But it took them 18 months of hard work with an executive mandate from the top to do that. So it's not an easy path. But that's a far harder effort than going and figuring out what that room standard should look like and what the boxes that go into that are.
I think if I rephrase the question for you, Julian, is what are the most important features you think an integrator should have if they're thinking of support. Well, in fact, if probably fatuous to say thinking of, they either are or they're not. Most important quality if a customer is looking at an integrator, what is the most important quality you think they should have that convinces them that this is a person that is capable of supporting them?
So thank you for the qualification, which meant I didn't answer your question the first time around, but let me try and illuminate on that. I think we just have to accept that there is no one single integrator on their own that can solve this problem on their own. I genuinely don't think that there's actually a single IT organization that can actually deliver as one company effectively around the world to that standard. So we shouldn't give ourselves a hard time by setting the bar so high and believing that IT have solved this problem. They haven't. We're in the same game. So I think if you start with that premise that there's not one single company that can do that, you then have to look at what the alternative models are. And I think what we're starting to see now is that decisions are being made based on what the reality of the situation is. The GPA exists because it actually brings global scale and delivery capability and ownership and accountability to the customer, which is what they want, and they want consistency and they want standards. But the beauty of it is it brings that local knowledge as well as that feet on the ground that understand not just the environment, they understand building codes, they understand taxes, they understand culture, they speak the language as their first language as opposed to a second language. These are the kind of softer factors that actually are really important when, as Byron said, this isn't a technology problem. If you want to solve this just by designing standards and saying, well, that's it, our job is done, we now have a standard, just go do. It doesn't work like that with AV. It might with putting network switches around the world into a data center, because that's pretty straightforward to do. But when you're trying to actually deliver a room environment with and trying to do so in conjunction with the architect and the general contractor, and you're dealing with building codes and all that kind of stuff, it's much more complex in doing that. So having the global scale and capability, having the standards, having the program management, having the support model in place is absolutely essential. But then you have to bring that local knowledge and those local skills and those what I would term the analog effect that comes together with the digital effect, and combine that together to deliver the value to the customer. And this is what the lessons learned, this is what our customers are now saying as we've embarked on this process, as we've tried to do this over the last 3 or 4 years. We used to think it was just like how you'd globalize IT, and now we've realized it's not that way. And so this is where that sort of hybrid model of going global but then having that local delivery capability is absolutely essential.
Perhaps a final word with you, Matt, being the usually sharp end of all this. Do you feel as though the industry is delivering and helping you achieve what you need to do internally? Are they you're in a way a rock, helping you, giving a different perspective on perhaps what you're doing, and giving you the support and advice, and perhaps that's essential strength when you need it when you're in the middle of a huge, particularly political stage of development?
Absolutely. I would say every organization is different, but it's pretty easy to get stuck in your bubble when you work at only one company and only see one way of doing things sometimes. So we certainly rely on that perspective, absolutely. And to Julian's point, that I couldn't agree more with the cultural factor with that. And the more time I spend in South America, the more that I'm trying to really get my head just in how things work there. And it's an entirely different way of doing business. And it's not just it's not just a way of delivering projects and that, but it's a way of working together. It's not really that much to do with AV or technology at all.
That's great. Julian, Byron, Matt, thank you so much. Thank you for joining us. It's an AV panel. We're going to be running these from now until the end of the year. So and I'll be on a variety of subjects. So I'll hope you'll join us for our next session. Thank you.